Come back. Tyre prices are in for a whopping increase. The Trade and Industry Department is increasing import levies by over 38%. Another blow to consumers' pockets. The Road Freight Association is appealing with the department to reconsider the decision. Gavin Kelly is the association's CEO and joins me now to talk a bit more about that move. So, Gavin Kelly, you clearly are not happy with this import levy. Government says it's basically to counter the effects of dumping of tyre imports into the South African market. But you believe it should not have been done this way?
Good afternoon, Tilla, and good afternoon to your viewers. Yeah, I think there are two things really that the association really wants government to consider. And the first is that before we implement any sort of levy like this, and this is a big levy, 38%, coming quite quickly on the back of tyre prices that increased in July, their normal annual increase. This is a big increase, and it's going to hit anybody who uses tyres, whether it's for passenger transport, so buses or taxis or private motor transport, and it's going to hit us in the freight industry quite badly. That's going to be an increase that we weren't expecting. It's going to be, perhaps for some, it's going to be the beginning of the end for them. They're just not going to be able to deal with this. So that's the first thing, is that this is rather a large levy. But more importantly, what we're saying to government is, do we have a business in this country, a tyre manufacturing business or sector or industry that we need to protect? And if we do need to protect it, then we've got to take it in small steps, because what we do know is that our industry can only produce between 17 and 21% of the tyres that we require. So we're importing around about 80% of tyres. And it doesn't make sense to now go and lash huge levies on these tyres because they're being imported in the name of protecting local industry. And we cannot produce these tyres.
So you are saying to me that as things stand, we rely a lot on imports because there isn't a tyre manufacturing industry that would easily step up and plug the gap. If we wanted to avoid these tyres that will be subject to this massive import levy, we simply couldn't operate as a country functionally because there wouldn't be enough supply. Is that what you're saying?
That's 100% correct. That's what we've been told by the various players in the industry. We import tyres from the US, from Germany, from Japan, and from China. These levies are being put onto the tyres coming from China. So that's also a bit of a strange one. Why aren't you levying everybody who imports tyres into the country? But more importantly, we import these tyres because we can't produce them locally. So are we not shooting ourselves in the foot here? Should we not, first of all, develop, grow the tyre manufacturing industry in this country, make sure that it actually is sustainable, that it can meet demand. And then we can look at, over a period of factoring in this sort of protectionism or this sort of guarantee that we would be able to continue to be sustainable in the country, not coming in a fell swoop when we don't have that capacity.
Yeah, but organizations such as the South African Tyre Manufacturers Conference, which I'm told includes Continental, Bridgestone, Goodyear, Sumitomo, and others, will probably see it a bit differently. Not that I've spoken to them, but I imagine, given their track record of raising issues around unfair trade practices that undermine the local industry, I do imagine that they will have a different perspective from yours.
Well, one would think so, Tula. And again, what the association is saying is that, do we have this capacity in the country to manufacture our own tyres? How many of the tyres do they actually import? And if we have our own manufacturing capacity, why is it that it cannot produce enough product to meet our needs? So we need to understand that. And then if there are simple things like the factory isn't big enough, and I'm now being stupid, but if the factory isn't big enough, then let's double the factory. Let's get funding in to do that. Let's grow that sort of sort of factory. Let's grow the industry in the country. And then we can start looking at closing the taps, if you would, on what's flowing into the country in ready-made product. Then it makes sense, makes perfect sense. But right now, where we have to import, we have no choice, we have to import. Why are we suddenly now targeting that? That's only going to hurt us. It's going to drive our costs in terms of operations up between 8 and 11%, depending on what type of operation you have as a freight operator, depending on where you operate and the conditions. And that sort of increase is going to go straight towards you and I, the consumer. That's where it's going to go. Transporters can't absorb this, and it's going to put further upward pressure onto things like inflation.
Yeah. And my understanding is that you are engaging with the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition with a view to what? To try and get them to reconsider? Is that even still possible at this stage?
Tula, I think anything is possible. I think, when one sits down and discusses and gets to the actual reasoning why we are here, I'm sure that alternatives can be brought out. And various role players have been chatting to the department. And that has been our approach, is that can we not put this on ice at the moment? Let's understand what sort of effect this is going to have on the South African economy. And can we not grow this capacity? And then over a period, if we then deem it correct and it's not going to hurt the economy and it is going to assist local business, then we can gradually bring in this sort of levy. But to bring in, it's almost a 40% levy.
Yeah. And my understanding is that it has already kicked in, has it?
It was promulgated to be in place from the 9th of September 2022, yesterday, yes.
Yeah. And lastly, Gavin, just taking some of what you've said to its logical conclusion, the ripple effect of any increase in the costs of input, particularly in a sector like yours, freight and trucking, in a country where much of our freight moves on road as opposed to rail and others. I imagine that will be huge.
Well, of course, we've got figures that are bandied about that roughly 88% of all goods on land is transported by truck. I think every single piece of goods or type of commodity at some stage in its transport cycle will have a road leg, just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But the reality is that whatever you put in upstream is going to come flowing down to eventually to the consumer, whether the consumer is a private individual or a large consumer. That consumer will feel those goods becoming more expensive because transport becomes more expensive. And as I said before, between 8 and 11% is the type of figure we're seeing that's going to ripple through. We're going to have to see as we do our maths as we go along what that actual figure is going to be. But remember, Tula, this is also going to affect taxis and buses. It's going to have a huge impact on those people who need transport to get to work, who can't work from home, whether you're private, own your own vehicle, or whether you're traveling by bus.
And is there room for a conversation around ramping up our own tyre manufacturing capacity? I mean, the fact that we've had to rely on imports on its own, perhaps, is arguably quite problematic, where we could ramp up our own manufacturing. Or is that a conversation that we don't have the luxury of having right now and sort of forcing that conversation through a levy increase such as the one we are seeing? It's a valid conversation, but perhaps the time right now, given where we are with the industry, just not being the right time to have it now?
I think any time's the right time to have a conversation, Tula. I think, and that's what we've been saying. We've been saying to the minister and the department, let's sit down and have a discussion. What do you have in place in terms of developing, creating, increasing capacity? Are there such plans? Is this what the levy is going to be used for, or part of the levy, or what's going to happen to this levy? So I don't think there's never a time for conversation. I think the time now is to have that conversation. If nothing else, if we cannot get the levy stopped, they may be reduced, but there is always an open door to have this conversation. From our side, definitely. From the consumer side, very, very definitely. They cannot take much more of this in terms of hits on their pocket.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on eNCA. That's Gavin Kelly. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Road Freight Association, talking to us about that import levy that is being imposed on imported tyres.